Let me tell you a story about how life can change in the blink of an eye. My name is Claire, and I used to work as a senior marketing strategist at one of the fastest growing tech companies in San Francisco. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning when everything unraveled. A day that started with coffee stains on my white blouse and ended with me standing in front of the entire company, holding an envelope that would alter the course of our lives forever. I remember walking into the office that morning feeling confident, maybe even smug. I had spent weeks preparing for this big presentation, an ambitious campaign proposal that could have catapulted us ahead of our competitors. The numbers were solid, the strategy innovative, and I knew deep down it was going to be a game changer. But there's something they don't teach you in business school. No matter how good your ideas are, nothing prepares you for betrayal. The meeting began like any other. Our CEO, Mr. Grayson, sat at the head of the conference table, his sharp suit and sharper gaze scanning everyone as if he were sizing us up. Around the table were familiar faces, colleagues who had become friends over late-night brainstorming sessions and shared victories. And then there was Rachel, my manager, who always seemed to hover somewhere between mentor and rival. She had been instrumental in bringing me on board 3 years ago, but lately, well, let's just say her support felt more conditional than genuine. As I stood by the projector screen, ready to present my masterpiece, I noticed Rachel exchanging glances with Grayson. There was something off about their body language, a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Still, I pushed through, diving straight into my pitch. I spoke passionately about market trends, consumer behavior, and how we could leverage social media influencers to create buzz around our product launch. For 20 minutes, I painted a picture of success so vivid, I swear I saw some people nodding along approvingly. But before I could wrap up, Rachel interrupted me mid-sentence. "Claire," she said, her voice calm yet cutting, "we need to talk." Her words hung in the air like storm clouds gathering overhead. Everyone turned toward her, curiosity morphing into concern. "Talk about what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the sinking feeling in my stomach. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at Grayson, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. That's when it hit me. This wasn't going to be a casual chat about tweaking slides or adjusting timelines. This was something else entirely. "I'm sorry, Claire," Rachel finally said, her voice devoid of emotion. "But after careful consideration, we've decided to let you go." Time froze. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. My heart pounded, so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. Let me go? How? Why? All these questions swirled in my mind, but all I managed to stammer out was, "What do you mean?" Rachel continued, her words precise and clinical. "Your performance hasn't met expectations lately, and given the direction we're heading, we feel it's best to part ways." Performance? Expectations? Those words felt like punches to the gut because they weren't true. Not completely, anyway. Sure, I'd made mistakes here and there. Everyone does. But firing me? In front of the whole team? During my presentation? Before I could process what was happening, Grayson chimed in. "We appreciate your contributions, Claire, but sometimes tough decisions must be made for the greater good of the company." Greater good? Was this really happening? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to defend myself against accusations that felt baseless. But instead, I found myself rooted to the spot, frozen by shock and disbelief. The eyes of my colleagues burned into me, some filled with pity, others with confusion, and a few, like Rachel's, with something colder, almost triumphant. And then, amidst the chaos swirling inside me, a memory surfaced. A single moment from months ago that now seemed eerily significant. It was during another meeting, one where I had casually mentioned an idea, a kernel of inspiration that eventually grew into the very campaign I was presenting today. At the time, Rachel had dismissed it with a wave of her hand, calling it too risky. Yet, somehow, pieces of that same idea had shown up in recent company updates, attributed to someone else entirely. It dawned on me, then, this wasn't about performance. This was about control, about silencing anyone who might overshadow those in power. And suddenly, clarity replaced the fog of disbelief. This wasn't just unfair, it was calculated. Still reeling, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rehearsed. Something primal within me took over, urging me to act. As I held it up, The room collectively leaned forward, intrigued and uneasy. Even Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "What's this?" Grayson asked, his tone wary. "This," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected, "is proof." "Proof of what, exactly?" "Well, that's where things get interesting. Inside that envelope were documents, emails, screenshots, drafts, all meticulously saved over the past year. They told a story of stolen ideas, manipulated metrics, and underhanded tactics designed to push me out while elevating others. It wasn't just paranoia talking, it was cold, hard evidence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then whispers broke out, growing louder until the room erupted into a cacophony of murmurs and gasps. Some people looked horrified, others outraged. Rachel's face turned pale, her composure crumbling like sandcastles hit by waves. Grayson shot her a look that could have melted steel, his earlier confidence replaced by panic. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. "Let me explain something," I said, raising my voice slightly to regain control of the room. "When I joined this company, I believed in its mission. I believed in teamwork, innovation, and integrity. What I didn't realize was how fragile those values truly are when greed gets involved." I paused, letting my words sink in. This isn't just about me being fired. This is about accountability, about exposing the truth behind closed doors. Because if we allow fear and manipulation to dictate our actions, then none of us are safe. By now, every pair of eyes in the room was glued to me. Some nodded in agreement, emboldened by the realization that they weren't alone in sensing something amiss. Others exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to trust what they were hearing. And then there were those who looked guilty, people who had stayed silent while injustices unfolded right under their noses. Rachel tried to speak, to deny everything, but her voice faltered. For once, she wasn't the polished professional everyone admired. She was exposed, vulnerable, and scrambling to save face. Grayson, meanwhile, looked like a man caught in a trap of his own making. His earlier bravado vanished, replaced by the desperate need to salvage whatever remained of his authority. "You may think this ends here," I continued, gripping the envelope tightly, "but it doesn't. This is just the beginning. The question is, what will each of you choose to do next? Will you stand by and watch as lies destroy everything we've built? Or will you fight for justice, for yourselves, for me, for the future of this company?" The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched on for what felt like hours, though in reality it was probably only seconds. Each person wrestled with their conscience, weighing the risks and rewards of speaking up versus staying quiet. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Whatever happened next, I had ignited a spark, one that had the potential to either burn brightly or fizzle out entirely. So here we are, standing at the edge of uncertainty, with the weight of choice pressing down on everyone in that room. What happens next? Well, that depends on them and on me. Because revenge isn't just about settling scores. It's about reclaiming power. And I'm not done fighting yet. The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat. I could feel the weight of their stares, the collective uncertainty hanging over us like a storm cloud ready to break. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged furtive glances, as if silently debating who would be the first to speak or act. Rachel finally broke the silence, her voice trembling, but still trying to assert control. "Claire, this is inappropriate. Whatever you think you have, it doesn't change the fact that your position here has been terminated." I turned to face her directly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Terminated? You make it sound so clean, so final. But let's call it what it really is, retaliation. Retaliation for refusing to stay quiet when my ideas were stolen, for questioning decisions that didn't sit right with me, and for daring to believe I deserved recognition for my work." Her jaw tightened, and she glanced at Grayson again, clearly hoping he'd step in to save her from this unraveling mess. But Grayson wasn't moving. He sat frozen, his usual authoritative demeanor replaced by something closer to dread. It was as though he was seeing Rachel, and perhaps himself, for the first time, stripped bare of the carefully constructed facades they had both maintained. "I'm not asking for pity," I continued, addressing the room now. "I'm asking for accountability. This envelope contains proof, not just of what happened to me, of patterns that have gone unchecked for far too long. Patterns of favoritism, manipulation, and outright theft. And before any of you dismiss this as sour grapes or some kind of personal vendetta, ask yourselves, how many times have you felt overlooked? How many times have your contributions been minimized while someone else took credit? A murmur rippled through the room, low at first, but growing louder. People began nodding, whispering to each other, sharing stories of their own frustrations. One colleague, Mark, spoke up hesitantly. "She's right. Remember last quarter's sales strategy? That was Claire's idea, word for word. But somehow, it ended up in Rachel's report." Another voice chimed in, Sophia, one of the junior designers. "And what about the client pitch last month? Claire stayed late every night working on those visuals, but Rachel presented them like they were hers." Each revelation added fuel to the fire, turning murmurs into outright accusations. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. No longer was I standing alone against the powers that be. Instead, I was surrounded by allies, united by shared grievances and newfound courage. Rachel tried to interrupt, raising her hands as if to regain order. "Enough! This is absurd. These are baseless claims." Baseless? I cut her off sharply, holding up the envelope again. "You want to call these baseless? Fine. Let's open it together, right now, in front of everyone. Or better yet, why don't you explain how your emails ended up in my inbox, detailing exactly which parts of my proposals you plan to take credit for?" Her face went white, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The room fell silent once more, waiting to see how she or anyone would respond. Grayson finally stirred, clearing his throat nervously. "Claire, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," I said firmly, cutting him off too. "This isn't a private matter anymore. What happens next affects all of us. If you're serious about transparency and integrity, then let's have this conversation openly. Otherwise, you're proving my point for me." He hesitated, visibly torn between damage control and self-preservation. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to will the situation away. "Fine. What do you propose we do?" It was the opening I needed. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, placing the envelope on the conference table where everyone could see it. "Here's what needs to happen. First, an independent investigation into the practices within this company. Not led by HR, that's too easy to manipulate, but by an external auditor with no ties to anyone in this room. Second, full disclosure of findings to the entire staff. Transparency, remember? And third," I paused, letting my words sink in before delivering the final blow. "Third, immediate action taken against anyone found guilty of misconduct. No exceptions." The room erupted again, this time with a mix of cheers and nervous laughter. It was surreal, watching the balance of power shift so dramatically in such a short span of time. For years, Rachel and Grayson had ruled with an iron grip, silencing dissent and rewarding loyalty above merit. Now, cracks were forming in their empire, threatening to bring the whole structure crashing down. But I knew it wasn't over. Far from it. While the tide seemed to be turning in my favor, there was still resistance lurking beneath the surface. There would be pushback, attempts to discredit me, and possibly even retaliation outside the confines of this meeting. Yet, despite the risks, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in months, or maybe ever. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, accountability, and reclaiming the values that had drawn me to this company in the first place. As the meeting dragged on, tempers flared, alliances shifted, and truths came spilling out. Some colleagues admitted to staying silent out of fear, while others confessed to knowingly participating in unethical behavior under pressure. Each admission brought us closer to understanding the scope of the problem and the work required to fix it. By the end of the day, exhaustion set in, but also a strange sense of hope. Change wouldn't come overnight, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself, a movement toward honesty, fairness, and respect. Still, questions lingered. Would Grayson follow through on his promise to support an investigation? Could the company survive the fallout if everything came to light? And most importantly, where did I fit into this new reality? Because whether I liked it or not, I had become the catalyst for change, the person everyone looked to for guidance, even though I wasn't sure I had all the answers myself. One thing was certain. Life, as we knew it at the company, would never be the same again. And as I packed up my things later that evening, preparing to leave the office indefinitely, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The company hired an external auditor, as I had demanded. And within weeks, the investigation uncovered a web of misconduct far more extensive than anyone had anticipated. Emails, documents, and testimonies painted a damning picture of systemic favoritism, unethical practices, and outright deceit. Rachel's role in manipulating projects and sidelining employees came to light, along with Grayson's complicity in turning a blind eye to maintain his own power. It wasn't just me who had been wronged. It was a pattern affecting dozens of employees over the years. Some had left quietly, disillusioned and defeated. Others had stayed, silently enduring the toxic environment. But now, with the truth exposed, there was no going back. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting, and after hours of deliberation, they made their decision. Rachel was terminated immediately, her reputation irreparably tarnished. Grayson, while allowed to remain CEO temporarily, was placed on probation and stripped of several key responsibilities. A new leadership team was brought in to oversee reforms, tasked with rebuilding trust and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. For my part, I became an unexpected figurehead in this transformation. Colleagues approached me constantly, sharing their gratitude for speaking out and asking how they could help drive change. At first, I felt overwhelmed by the attention, unsure if I deserved to be seen as some kind of hero. But slowly, I began to embrace the responsibility, not because I wanted glory, but because I realized that true leadership isn't about holding on to power. It's about empowering others. One afternoon, a few months after the initial upheaval, I found myself sitting across from one of the new executives, a woman named Elena who radiated warmth and competence. She leaned forward, her expression serious yet encouraging. "Claire," she said, "we need someone like you here. Someone who understands what went wrong and can help ensure it never happens again. We're restructuring the marketing department, and we'd like you to lead it." I blinked, caught off guard. "Lead it? Me?" "Yes, you," Elena replied firmly. "You've earned this. You stood up when no one else would, and your vision for ethical leadership aligns perfectly with where we want to take the company. What do you say?" For a moment, I hesitated. The idea of returning to the very place where I'd been betrayed felt daunting, even risky. But then I thought about all the colleagues who had rallied behind me, the ones who still believed in the company's potential despite its flaws. If I walked away now, wouldn't I be abandoning them and the chance to build something better? "I'll do it," I said finally, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. "But on one condition: we operate differently from day one. No more backdoor deals, no more fear-based management. We foster collaboration, creativity, and respect, or I walk." Elena smiled. "Deal." Months later, the company had transformed almost beyond recognition. Walls that once felt suffocating were replaced with open spaces designed to encourage communication. Employees who had once kept their heads down now spoke freely during meetings, unafraid to share ideas or challenge decisions. Morale soared, and productivity followed suit. Clients noticed the shift too, praising our renewed commitment to innovation and integrity. As for me, leading the marketing department became more fulfilling than I ever imagined. I surrounded myself with talented individuals who valued teamwork over ego, and together we launched campaigns that not only exceeded expectations, but also inspired meaningful conversations. One of those campaigns, a bold initiative focused on workplace ethics and inclusivity, even earned national recognition, further solidifying the company's reputation as a force for positive change. On a quiet Friday evening, as I packed up my things to leave the office, I paused to look around the bustling workspace. Laughter echoed through the halls, and people chatted animatedly, their faces lit with enthusiasm. It was a stark contrast to the tense, oppressive atmosphere I had once known. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Sophia, one of the junior designers who had supported me during that fateful meeting. "Just wanted to say thank you again, Claire. None of this would have happened without you." I smiled, typing back a quick response. "Thank you. This is everyone's victory." And it was While I had played a pivotal role in exposing the truth, the real heroes were the countless employees who refused to stay silent any longer. Together, we had taken a broken system and rebuilt it into something stronger, fairer, and infinitely more hopeful. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life had thrown me a curveball, forcing me to confront betrayal, fear, and uncertainty. But in doing so, it had also given me something invaluable: purpose. Sometimes, endings aren't tidy or perfect. They don't tie up every loose thread or answer every question. But standing there under the glow of the city lights, I realized something important. Endings are only beginnings in disguise. And this particular beginning, one rooted in courage, resilience, and collective action, was exactly what I needed to move forward. With a deep breath, I walked toward my car, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't alone.